So the first question is, since I see lots of young up-and-coming designers approach their design aesthetic from an avant-garde perspective, but only go so far in their career, do critics and buyers gravitate to more commercial slash practical styling rather than new designs following the Rick and Walter route? So by Walter van Beirendonck. So, really good question. And the answer is quite plain and simple. Now, the thing is that most people don't actually care about fashion in the way that, say, people that watch this channel do. And so because of that, most people will only wear, stuff that is seen as like normal, or stuff that they won't be made fun of by wearing, or stuff that in some places, if you wear stuff that's out of the ordinary, you might even get attacked. Not everyone is like me and is able to live in like London or live in like a city where people are a bit more open-minded. So of course that's one aspect. The second aspect is really, at the end of the day, like, buyers determine where the market goes. I've had so many conversations with buyers at this point that I just realized it's just about numbers. Like, buyers literally have all the data of what sells in their stores. And for people that don't know what buyers are the people that actually buy the clothes that you see in the stores. So when you walk into a shop like Selfridges or like Harrods in the UK, what you see on the racks has been bought by buyers. Because as you know, every brand has a range of clothes to buy, but what actually ends up in stores is a fraction of everything that's available season to season based on what the buyers buy. And like, if you look at the information that these buyers have, they have that, okay, what sells best in our store is maybe grey jackets for men and this type of shoe for women and this color of trousers. So when they go to Fashion Week or when they're looking at the clothes that different brands make, they have the SKUs and the colors and the designs in mind that they know sells. And so a lot of the avant-garde designers that we praise for being out of the ordinary, all of them have signifiers that are able to make them sell a lot of pieces, which is what basically enables them to be creative. If you look at the likes of Comme des Garçons, Rei Kawakubo is praised a lot for the fact that Comme des Garçons just does what they want. Rei Kawakubo designs that aren't necessarily wearable, and she doesn't have to. Now, why is that? Because her fragrance line is really good and it sells a lot. Dover Street Market is a huge success, and that just shows by they started in London and now they've expanded to so many different stores in some major locations in the world. And then, of course, you have the Comme des Garçons play line, which most people buy into. And most people I know, like some of my friends who just don't care about fashion, maybe from basketball or whatever, they don't even know that Comme des Garçons is anything else but Comme des Garçons play. Same thing with Rick Owens. Most people now, because Rick Owens is starting to become a mainstream sort of brand, most people now are really only aware of Rick Owens in terms of the very, 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 very commercial pieces, in terms of the Rick Owens Ramones, the Rick Owens drop crotch shorts, and maybe some like t-shirt, some long line t-shirt. You're not going to see majority of people wearing Rick Owens jackets with the crazy pointy shoulders and the interesting shapes, because most people just don't wear that and most people are not going to buy into that. So really, if you're a designer that has an avant-garde aesthetic or an aesthetic that is far away from the ordinary, you have to find a way to build a world in which you can create a commercial product and it doesn't take away from your original designs. So when Rick Owens makes Ramones, it doesn't necessarily take away from all the other really interesting creative stuff that Rick Owens makes. And that's a very, very difficult thing for a designer to actually achieve. I'm saying it now like it's a simple thing. It's definitely easier said than done. It's very difficult to be able to make something that's commercially viable, but it still makes sense in your wider world of clothing that is seen to be avant-garde. So yeah, in a nutshell, to answer that question, that is really the only way I've seen brands that are avant-garde actually be successful. And the ones that don't achieve that, they always go bankrupt or they don't last very long. And that's the reality of fashion, because sometimes we love these avant-garde designers and we love these brands. I mean, I love Issey Miyake, and Issey Miyake has insanely amazing ideas. But if it wasn't for his pleated designs, I don't think the brand would still exist today. And that is definitely the case for a lot of different brands. With what happened at Andy, do you think designers should have time to develop their ideas, or if it's just not the right fit, should they just fire them ASAP? As of recently, firing designers has been like sacking football managers. Now, yeah, the thing about the business of fashion and just like creative directors, and it seems recently a lot of creative directors have had like 1 or 2 seasons and they've been sacked. I definitely think it's really ridiculous, but it's easy for me to say because it's not my money that's being gone, right? And that's the issue. And this goes back to a lot of reading I've been doing in fashion in general and just like studying different fashion brands from a journalistic perspective. And I've come to realize that unfortunately, when brands have shareholders want to see profit every quarter, which is a lot of the time counterproductive to the long-term health of a brand, because sometimes you have to lose a bit of money in the short term so that you make a lot of money in the long term. Now, if you're an independent brand, you can do that because you run the brand. But when you have shareholders don't care about any circumstance or any long-term growth if they don't see an increase in profits in the short term. And so when you run a brand, you have to deal with this balance of, okay, we have to make sure that what we're doing is best for the long-term growth of this brand, but we also have to make sure that we keep the shareholders happy. Because if everyone's selling shares and then that becomes the narrative, then the value of our brand goes down, and that's not good for anyone. And so you really have to start balancing it out, which gets really complicated. And that's why sometimes a lot of designers aren't given a chance. But it's funny because a lot of the brands that keep sacking designers, they're not doing well. Like Gucci is not, when I say not doing well, of course it's relative because Gucci still makes like billions, but they're not seeing the growth that they've targeted and they're not growing as much as they want to. And the case at Under Meester is very interesting in terms of Ludovic de Saint-Sernin being sacked, or let me not say sacked because we don't know that to be true, but Ludovic leaving. It's very strange because I know I had a long live stream and you guys can watch that on kind of what happened. But since then, I have actually talked to buyers who have actually changed my opinion on kind of like the whole Ludovic Meester situation. Because I was of the opinion that for them to really break away after 1 season, it must be that the buyers just weren't interested or something along those lines. Because why would they act so hastily? But I've come to realize, talking to different buyers, that buyers actually did like the collection that Ludovic did. And buyers were interested in buying it. They just didn't get the chance to, which is even more insane that they didn't even get the chance to buy it. And they didn't get the chance to buy it for the brand Under Meester to even see if the season would be successful or not. Which is why, in specifically the Under Meester case, I think there's way more to the story that we're missing because, of course, I'm not part of the Andy team. I don't have the insider information on that specific thing. But for the most part, a lot of these brands are doing this balancing act between shareholders and long-term growth. And that's why we see a lot of brands acting a bit hastily. And I think the fashion bubble, it's only a matter of time before it bursts. Because how much can brands just grow and grow and grow and grow and grow and grow and grow, not caring about the long-term health and making a lot of short-term and short-sighted decisions before everything just crashes? I think it's a matter of time, especially because I made that video recently about how the price of a lot of fashion items are going up while the quality is simultaneously going down. It's just a matter of time before the whole thing goes boom. So I'm just editing the video now and I realized I left out a really important point that would provide a bit more context. So when you think about where fashion has gone, you realize that there's a lot more at stake in fashion right now. So if you look at fashion of the times of Marc Jacobs, when Marc Jacobs was the first designer at Louis Vuitton ready-to-wear, then you realize that, well, Louis Vuitton, LVMH, Bernardo, no, they didn't have anything to lose because that was the first time of them doing that experiment. And of course, these brands back then, when designers were given a chance, you know, the McQueens, the Gallianos, that were these up and coming designers getting to be designers at the helm. And even though it wasn't working at first, them being given time, that is all because there just wasn't that much at stake back then. And the few times when there is a lot at stake, the times when designers are allowed to stay is when the brands have no choice. Think of when Alessandro Michele became creative director at Gucci. They needed someone desperately, so they were forced into giving Alessandro a chance because of the short time frame between when Frida Giannini left and when they needed a new creative director. But in the modern fashion now, the numbers that these fashion brands make, the numbers that they're talking about, the billions, there's way, way, way too much money at stake now for them to take the kind of risks that they used to take before. That's also a reason why I feel like this whole fashion system is going to crash, because these brands just want to keep growing forever. And I always feel like there's surely a limit. There's a maximum number of customers that you can reach before there are literally no more left. So we'll see. Now, last question, also very interesting. It's, do you think people grade their idea of good fashion based on an overall grading scale? Or do you think most people look at the genre of clothing to determine if it's good clothing in that genre? For example, do you see people comparing formal clothing against casual clothing? Or do most people just compare formal wear to other formal wear? This is such a really good question. And of course, I'm only one person, but I can just give my opinion on what I think. I think it depends who you ask. And I think it depends in what realm of fashion you're having that conversation. So something I have noticed on our side of fashion being the type of people that watch this channel are quite interested in fashion on a deeper level and care about the inspiration behind brands. You guys probably care about fashion history, maybe some of you don't. And so there tends to be, on this side of fashion, a lot of people, I feel like they don't compare fashion properly. And what I mean by that is, and I've said this in my last live stream actually, where so many different designers are famous for doing so many different things. And I've heard people say things like, Martin Margiela is the best fashion designer of all time, or Alexander McQueen is the best fashion designer of all time, and stuff like that. And I just think those kind of opinions are insane when you think of how many designers are good for doing different things, like the fact that Oswald Boateng, in a way, changed the face of where Savile Row tailoring went. He also pushed Savile Row tailoring into the mainstream. That's one way of having an impact on fashion. And then you have older designers like Elsa Schiaparelli or Paul Poiret, Madeleine Vianney, who, you know, she inspires so many current designers now, including people like Rick Owens. So many, if you look at fashion history, there's so many different designers that are famous for different things and have their impact in different ways. And they're in so far apart different sectors of fashion. You even have designers who are on the activewear side, who have developed the way that sportswear is designed now, so that sportswear is better at sweat wicking. So to just say one designer name and say that, oh, Margiela is the best designer of all time, it's not even an argument. I will never understand that type of mentality. It's actually insane to say that one person, like, objectively is just the best designer that has ever lived. Wild. And that's, I think, is a problem that we have on this side of fashion. Because on this side of fashion, we tend to only look at one type of fashion, one style of fashion, probably just avant-garde stuff. And we tend to forget about tailoring and sportswear and everything else, which is still fashion and just as relevant. And also things that are ideas from tailoring inform a lot of designers that are on the avant-garde side, or the, you know, type of brands that show at Paris Fashion Week and Milan Fashion Week side of things. So yeah, I think nowadays people still don't compare fashion in a very, very objective way, being that every sector of fashion has something to offer into the conversation. And you can't objectively say that one side is more relevant than the other, or better, or has more impact than the other. I think they all influence each other and they all impact each other. And I think that, yeah, we shouldn't really compare formal wear to formal wear or contrast clothing as being better or not better. I don't really know how you can objectively say that that clothing is better than that clothing on an objective level. What you can do is you can look at a runway show, which I do, and see if someone's ideas make sense in a collection, or if the ideas that they're trying to portray were portrayed properly, or probably is not the right word, but portrayed effectively is a better word. That's more of a conversation I want to have, rather than McQueen is better than Margiela, Yohji Yamamoto is better than Issey Miyake, Rei Kawakubo is better than Elsa Schiaparelli. Those kind of conversations, they don't make sense. They don't go anywhere. No one wins. So yeah, that's my opinions on that. But yeah, this is really fun. I love these Q&A videos, even though I don't do many of them. So definitely send in your questions. Also, if you want access to extra exclusive content, you can subscribe to my Patreon. Of course, the support from my Patreon keeps these videos going and keeps my channel running. And it's from that support that I'm able to do what I do. And you also get access to really, really exclusive content. I will say you can even just check before you subscribe and see like what videos I posted recently. But yeah, on that note, I'll be back with another video very soon.